Good afternoon, and for good evening, even rather, wherever you're listening to this. It is the oh, God, I'm all over the place today. It is the football podcast, the women's football podcast here on finalwhistle.ie with myself, Breifne Earley, and Aaron Clarke. Again, apologies, and you can probably hear it in my own voice. I've got a bit of a something going on at the moment. Aaron, you were under the weather last week. It's been a bit of hit and miss for the last month for us. We've missed 2 weeks now because of ill health. How are you feeling? How's the body?
Yeah, it's all right. Still not 100%, but you know what? The worst part of it was I was so excited to go out and watch football last week. I was like, I'm not working. I'm working this weekend. I'm gonna go out and watch football. My whole week is planned. You get unwell and get ill, and you're like, everything is just dropped. And like, the worst part of it is it's sort of, I actually had somebody send me a message on Twitter last week asking, is there no podcast this week? And I was like, and I was just so unfortunate not. And I was like, it's one of them that's, we're so used to it now in the Wednesday evenings that it's not there. You're sort of like, I missed that.
So if you have been kind of crying yourself to sleep for the last 6 nights, wondering where the lads gone, we are back. Don't worry, you'll have to put up with us for a little bit longer. We're going to be talking all things Women's League of Ireland, of course. Plenty of games last weekend, some really big wins. That particularly, I suppose, we'll pick a couple out. We'll go through them all in detail, but you have to talk about Treaty's win in Galway. Fantastic result for them. It really shows how far they've come in the last maybe 18 to 24 months, and particularly this year with a couple of really big additions, some outstanding performances from a lot of girls there. Athlone had a big win in Sligo. They showed why they're top of the league and why Sligo are struggling towards the foot of the table with a comprehensive 4-0 victory. Could have been a couple more. Peamount with a narrow win down in Waterford despite the best efforts of Maeve Williams. We're seeing these goalkeeper performances week in, week out. Una Foyle, honourable mention from her. Maria O'Sullivan as well, with big performances, but plenty of stuff to talk about. Shels, obviously 6-1 winners, and the goal we probably want to talk about most is the one. Ellen Molloy with an absolute humdinger of a run.
I don't know.
Shels switch off a little bit.
Aibeen Clancy's for me is
True.
Is as much of a peach of a goal, but the Molloy goal, it's just,
for me, the goal of the weekend was Bella Flocchini's second in down for Treaty, because everything about it was class. The run out of the back from the left full, the Japanese girl whose name escapes me right now, Ikeza, is it? Yeah. She had Ikeza, I think. She had a great run down the left-hand side, got into a little bit of space, found Kate Lawlee, and the first touch from Lawlee and the little flick pass through to Flocchini was just unreal. She rounded the keeper, defender got back, and she just kind of, I'm not even sure she struck the ball. She kind of just hooked the ball into the back of the net from close range. But I thought that was probably my highlight of the weekend in terms of scores. But there was plenty of them. Maddie Gibson's lob for the third goal in Sligo was pretty obscene as well. Where do you want to start? Because we're going to be talking leases. There's loads of stuff happening over the last 2 weeks. We've got a new international squad. We've got a new lease for Treaty down the Markets Field. That's a big statement from them. A long-term lease taking over the operational running of the field. I know from personal experience that was a huge stumbling ground for all of Limerick soccer in the last maybe two decades or so, was having a permanent home base that they could call themselves, that they had full control over. That's now the case in Limerick. That's huge. Shels also with a big announcement this week. 2 big announcements this week. One is their new community officers, friend of the show, Kristen Sample. She has got herself a new job. She's been there a little while already. She's got her feet wet under the desk. She's happy out, but she was announced officially this week, as well as a big announcement on their training facilities. They've been using the AUL for their academy games and training for a long time, but now it's an official, I think, 18-year lease. So similar to what Bohemians have with DCU. That's going to open up a whole host of things, particularly in the way of funding and access and all that. So it's been a busy week. Aaron, where are we going to start? You pick.
I reckon we start, and just because I reckon we start with Treaty, just because I've actually questions on that. Because I know for a number of years we've seen it similar to UCD in the sense of there's often been rugby games on in Markets Field and stuff like that. So you're saying now with Treaty having that agreement, they pick and choose what games?
Yeah, it's a huge statement from Treaty. Absolutely huge statement for the club, for the region. And I think it's the first, we've seen green shoots from this involvement with the Canadian financiers and Ciara McCormack's role within all of that. But I think this is the first meaningful, long-lasting contract or deal that's going to actually secure the future of football in the Markets Field for the foreseeable future. And it does mean no rugby unless Treaty agree to it. Treaty are now, it appears to be, based on the press release I read, that Treaty basically control the Markets Field, which I think is a huge statement and a huge benefit to the club going forward.
But like it's massive. That's a massive coming off the back of the result against Galway, and like you're talking about the finish from Flocchini, but the ball for me, I just couldn't get over Katie Lawley's ball, and I'm just looking at it, I'm like, wow. But we've seen that a few times from Treaty this year. Like you look at it against DLR Waves as well, when Flocchini had that, but this time she passed to Gillian O'Toole. That time she did, but it's just the passing, the movement, the back to front. There was an effort in the first half where they literally went from their own left side all the way back up. They've done it multiple times, and I think for me, like, yes, they beat Galway last year when they played in the league late in the season, when maybe Galway were running out of a bit of steam, and you sort of say, okay, it's coming towards the end of the season. But the fact that what I took out of this game in particular was the bounce back from Treaty, in the sense of they had been pipped back when they were playing against the likes of Shels when they equalised, and Shels go and score a couple of goals. Athlone, Shamrock Rovers, where they've been sort of having that opportunity and then dying off in the game. Where in this game, for me, they sort of kept going. I will say the one thing from a Treaty viewpoint is they probably won't want to see the goal that Eve Dawson scored, considering the run. Dawson made a superb run for the equaliser, and it was a really, really nice header. But like, even the first goal for me from Flocchini, like you're talking about the second one for the calmness, but the first one where she just gets that half a yard of space and turns, and I was interested she didn't take the penalty. Like me and you were talking off air on Saturday, and like on a hat trick, I was thinking she's gonna take it, but
she doesn't strike me as
selflessness.
She doesn't strike me as the type of personality, and we only had her on the show a couple of weeks ago, and we spent a bit of time chatting to her, but she doesn't strike me as the person who is demanding that, who wants that little bit of notoriety. She's quite happy for the team to succeed, and I think she takes a lot of pleasure from watching the likes of Katie Lawlee, Cara,
Griffin,
yeah, all these youngsters coming through, Madison McGann, making a real big impact. And she wants to be that talisman, yes, but also kind of leading them into their own careers and their own footballing experience, because she seems quite happy to play to a player who's in a better position than her regularly. And I think Madison McGann took the last penalty that they had the week before, and I think it's just showing that she's on penalties. She's obviously an unbelievable striker of a ball, and she's going to take that when she gets the opportunity. And I think it's good to see
kid.
They're all for the team,
though. That's the big thing for me.
16? Is she 17 yet? I don't think so.
I think she's 16 still.
Yeah, it's mad. It's so good to see the older girls in that squad. And I'm looking at the likes of Akeza, Anna Rocket, Isabella, Madeline Robbins. They're really kind of bringing the girls with them. It's not just one or two players across the field. I think there's 6 or 7 could have put their hand up for a team of the week this week. But
I also think it's an important result for Treaty as well, for the fact that they'd come off the back of 3 defeats in a row, losing to Athlone, Shelbourne, and probably the magnitude of the way they lost to Peamount. And I think when we talk about Peamount later in the show, like you can see that when Peamount click, Peamount could score 5, 6, 7 goals in a game. And for me, I just think the way they bounce back, it's the complete opposite of Galway, who are going on the opposite way now. Treaty are ending the 3-game run. Galway are now on the 3-game slide, and like I don't think it was a terrible performance from Galway. I really don't. The one thing I took away from the game is Lindsay McKee has been on the bench this week and last week for the last couple. She's been on this bench this week, and she was on the bench last week for Galway. I think Galway need that bit of experience back. They need something. They need someone like that. But for Galway, it's 8 goals conceded in the last 3 games. It's been a really rocky period.
There are a couple of bright shoots for Galway, though, it has to be said. You mentioned Lindsay McKee seems to be back on a route to being on the pitch. Aisling Meany seems to be struggling with an injury as well. She's kind of come off the bench the last couple of games, and hopefully we'll see her back from the start in the coming weeks. But one name who actually it was my favorite social media thing of the week was they have a youngster playing with them. I think it's Emily Fitzgerald. And she's kind of been around the squad. She's had a couple of appearances from the bench late on, but I loved the little tweet that they put out. I sent it to you, and you kind of got a bit of a giggle out of it as well, where she was like, "Oh, I got a bit lucky at the under-19 level. I just got the 4 consecutive hat tricks." Like, it's great to see someone with that ability at a young coming through the under-19s, that maybe we might see flashes of that, because they do have quality going forward. Like, you're looking at the likes of Emma Doherty's one of the best strikers in the league. You put someone else of the same quality around her, with McKee, Meany, Amanda Smith, and others, Rola, as well. Like, there's plenty of attacking talent there in Galway. And then as you go further back, they have the players. But I think we can say that nearly of every team now, which is great. Before we leave Galway and Treaty, of course, they did play the previous week as well. It seems we haven't been here for 2 weeks. Galway, of course, did have a big defeat, as you mentioned, to Shels the week before, and now they're looking to be just struggling a little bit. Treaty, I think, as well as importance in this season, I think that result is a bigger deal for a lot of different reasons in the wider sense of how the club is perceived, because you look at the absolute drain of talent that's come out of Treaty in the last 4 or 5 years. You got your Jenna Slattery's, you've got your Gillian Keenan's. Like, there's one to every single club.
I'm going to say a name. I'm going to say a name for you. Starting goal in that game, Nicole Nix is another one.
Yeah, absolutely. And you start now looking at Amy Madden, another that springs to mind in that Galway squad. So you start looking at these girls and going, actually, do you know what? We have as good an opportunity in Limerick as we have in Galway, and they can beat them. They're on a level with them. I don't need to travel to play at that level anymore. The perception that Treaty aren't at the races doesn't actually have to exist anymore in the eyes of a 14 or 15 or 16-year-old in Limerick. And I think for me, that's the key part. Moving on from that game, let's pick
just quickly before you do, just add to that. Like, me and you were chatting air start last week. I had a conversation with Tegan Lynch at an FAI amateur game, and like, she was telling me even about the travels, and we were talking about the travels that some of the players doing in the country at the minute, and like some of the travels that some players are doing to come to play for football clubs. It's astronomical, or it's unsustainable, and I think this sort of thing is what we want, to give that viable option, to give that other option, to say, hey, these are here. Like, you wouldn't have necessarily had that a couple of years ago. And even with the likes of an Athlone first coming into the league, struggled, but and now look, the league champions. You're looking at Galway have obviously won the last 2 All-Ireland Cups. So there's definitely different avenues for players now, and I think that's important, that that avenue continues to go as the league seasons continue, as the league continues to kick on.
Yeah, let's talk Shels for a moment. 6 goals from them down in Ferry Carrig. It didn't really kick off, despite scoring very early on. Kate Mooney got a great goal, but didn't have a whole pile to do apart from the finish. The defense just seemed to be completely AWOL for that. But
that is actually disgraceful from you. To describe that goal, you have to give Alex Kavanagh the credit. No, Alex Kavanagh's pass.
Where was the defense though? There was nobody within
the pass. Was no. But if you actually look back, the Galway game, they've done 2 exact passes in that. The first goal in the Galway game for Rebecca Cook is a very similar pass, and the second goal in the Galway game is another pass like that just splits the defense from Shels. And it's something they're definitely working on this, because it's something that they've tried a few times this season, and the quick ball around the corner. But like, even when you talk about defense, we'll talk about the goals probably a little bit more detail. But for me, the biggest thing that I take away from that Wexford defense is the fact that 4 of them goals were headers. Yeah, that's the biggest thing from a Shels viewpoint. Is 4 of the goals were headers, and some of them were just very easy headers as well.
Yeah, let's talk about the substitution later on in the second half, because it was 2-0 right up until like 60 odd minutes, 62, 63 minutes, and they brought on a triple substitution that any manager in the league would absolutely love to have. Like, I think every single one of them has caps at senior level. Noelle Murray, Jess Gargan, and Roman McLaughlin. And I jokingly, I'm not jokingly, but I put together my team selection of the week, and Roman McLaughlin was in it despite only playing 28 minutes. I thought she was that good. I had a chat with Owen Wearing after the Galway game, and we were talking about Noelle Murray, because Noelle hasn't started the last couple of games from. She's come off the bench, and she's been sensational coming off the bench. And it's like, we started talking about what they do. Like, the 2 girls up top are playing very well, and then Noelle is just nearly probably banging his door down to say, what else do I have to do? Like,
if you can make that sort of change, it's scary. I sent you a thing from Kev Doyle, who does a lot of stats for Shelbourne on Saturday, where he was saying in the last 30 minutes, Shels have scored 22 of their 35 league goals this season have come in the last half an hour. Like 35 goals in 8 games. In 9 games is actually...
That has to be a fitness situation, because you're looking at more than 4 goals a game, and this league is not a gimme league like there was a couple of games 5-10 years ago that you're going to win 6 or 7-0. They don't exist anymore, that you can absolutely predict them with 100% accuracy. You could back then. So scoring that many goals is just unbelievable, really.
It's a combination of 2 things, I think, for me. I think you're right in the fitness, but the biggest thing I would say is Shels have never been ruthless. Shels have had teams where they've been all over them and they've struggled to labour to a 1-2-0 win when they probably should have won 6 and 7-0. This season, against teams that are really good teams, they're not doing that. They're going and they're actually scoring goals. They're scoring goals for fun. Like I said to you at the start of the season, I said Kay Mooney will score 18 goals for them and I'm winning player of the year. I think she's already on 7. She's on 7 or 8 goals already. Yeah, looking at other players in the league, I have a feeling now, is 18 goals going to be enough to win the Golden Boot this year in this league? I'm actually not sure.
No, I'm looking at the list here in front of me. Kelly Brady and Mackenzie Anthony on 8, Kate Mooney on 7, Flocchini and Molloy, 2 wonder goals from them this week as well, 6 each, and then the Scatter girls on 5. Pearl Slattery again scored at the weekend. Emily Corbett is 5.
Was it 12 or 13 last year? The Golden Boot was.
Yeah, I don't have it to hand, but yeah, something like that. It wasn't particularly high. I think Maddie Gibson won it in the end. Did she?
Jenna Slattery.
Oh yeah, she was gone. Did she finish the year? I can't remember off the top of my head.
She did. She scored. She scored on the last day herself. Julianne Russell, and who was the other one? Who was the other one? There was 3 of them scored on the last day of the season when they were on Kate Mooney. I think it was when they were going for the Golden Boot. So the Golden Boot last year was won with 10 goals.
Yeah, we're already at 9, and we're not even or 8, or not even at the halfway point yet. And with the extra 2 games, of course, as well, against arguably a new team, it does give you a little bit of a lift up. Let's move on to that new team actually at the weekend. Waterford hosted Peamount. We've seen some really good stuff out of Waterford. We've seen a little bit of, we'll call it naivety at this level, in terms of maybe a little mistake that cost them goals a few times this season. But at the weekend, first of all, we've talked about their goalkeeper, Maeve Williams, time and time again on the show. She's got huge experience at Wexford. She was immense at the weekend. She probably saved them 4 or 5 times, I felt, from conceding. They did eventually get the goal. I think it's a bit, I'm going to get shot by Peamount now, but I think there was an element of definitely an element of offside in the build-up. I think when the ball was initially played back in by Ruby Gallagher, Sive Doyle is offside.
Close.
Takes a touch off the defender, but I still think in my case that's interfering with play. It should have been a free out. If that happens, Waterford get a point. Peamount, we're talking about where do Peamount go from here. Karen Duggan tapped it home in the end. They got out of jail, really. Peamount, they won't be happy with that performance, I'd imagine, Aaron.
They should have scored 6, 7, 8. They could have easily scored 8 goals that game, and that's a testament to Maeve Williams. And the funny thing about it is you'd sort of think with Maeve going to Waterford, local club, involved with the club, what does she really have left as a keeper, considering she hasn't had the last couple of years she would have wanted at Wexford? But I tell you this now, she's probably right up thereabouts with some of the other goalkeepers for the goalkeeper of the year. Like, no disrespect, and I don't mean to be critical here of Amanda McQuillan or I can't say her name, it eludes me, the Athlone Town goalkeeper. But for me, both of them goalkeepers are playing with quality players in front of them, and they're expected to keep 10, 11, 12 clean sheets. Whereas Maeve Williams is, can she fight and buy her team a point in a certain game here or a certain game there? And I just think Maeve Williams this year has been at Waterford's star player by a mile.
But there's been a few of them. Bonnie McKiernan, you could throw into the hat there.
100%.
Down in Sligo. And as well as that, I'd actually put There's another player who impressed me at the weekend, Una Foyle in Cork. I thought she was excellent. Marie O'Sullivan has had some really, really good performances this year for Wexford. When you go below, again, those top two who look like they're going to run away with the league now, it looks like a 2-horse race, even at this early stage. There's an 8-point gap between second and third.
We never even mentioned the fact that Marie O'Sullivan's had the penalty.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the performances, who impressed me in the Peamount game, the usual suspects were great, the Karen Duggans of this world, and who should kind of show up every week. But one name I hadn't been that familiar with, who I was really impressed with in the bits of the game I watched, was Ruby Gallagher. She had a couple of good efforts. She was always an out ball on that left wing. She cut in for a couple of chances. It was her endeavour that created the goal opportunity, and she had one unbelievable effort that Maeve Williams produced, probably the save of the weekend from early on in the game that could have maybe set her up for a goal scoring opportunity. But I thought she was really, really good. I had her in my team of the week selections as well.
I think herself and young Melia have been very, very good for Peamount, very, very good for Peamount. And like when we've talked over and over, like Sive Doyle's now playing some more regular games for them. Like they haven't got the depth, so they're reliant on these youngsters to sort of get them out of, not necessarily get them out of trouble, but sort of put in these big performances to help the team. And like I thought she was very good as well in Cork. Gallagher, I thought we had to chat about whether Becky Watkins's goal should she have left for Gallagher after the run, but like it's a couple of times now that you're starting to see that, it's great that it's not just that one little spot here or there. It's a couple of times, and these are the sort of players that Peamount need because they're very light on the ground in terms of squad depth. So the youngsters standing up is.
There's a few clubs who are a bit light on sub numbers most weeks when you look at the teams that they're putting out.
We said that at the start of the year about Shels. I think they named 19. They don't need 19 players. And some of them are sort of filling their benches from the odd time with underage players. But the problem here is when the underage teams are playing at the same time, you sort of can't do that because you're either going to take a player who 50-50, she might get a minute on the pitch for a senior team, or she may not even. And then where compare that to say playing 90 at 19s or 17s level, you sort of don't want to do that either because it's not good for the players' development just to sit in the first team bench if you know they're not going to play just to fill the bench.
Well, for me, as someone who's been involved with teams that level, they tend to be okay because it's the 17s on a Saturday, the 19s on a Sunday, so you tend to not overlap with the most likely group of players in your club that are going to be pulled up. But it's the girl who travels maybe from Dublin to Cork or Sligo or Galway for a game on a Saturday, sits on a bench, does a warm-up, does very little else, and then is expected to go to Wexford or to Waterford for a game the following morning in the under-19 league game and be on her game, having maybe come back late and gone early. Like you don't know as well. There could be an hour round trip or an hour each way to and from the bus depot or wherever they're getting left off from. So it's it just takes its toll. I think it is fair to say on that. Let's chat about DLR and Cork because this was, I suppose, an opportunity for both teams to get a meaningful result for themselves. Neither team have really set the world alight. DLR hadn't picked up a point before the game, and Cork had kind of early on looked like they were half decent, but haven't really managed to get. They won't be happy with the recent form. Going into the game, we kind of predicted that it might be a chance for both teams to get a result, and that's kind of how it panned out. It's a 1-1 draw. Neither team particularly happy, but nobody upset either. Would that be a fair way to wrap? It wasn't a great game, let's be honest.
I think it's probably fair to say they're both on a very similar level, and that's the one thing I took away from the game. Young Aisling Meehan with the goal for DLR, and we've talked about it a little bit this year, even last year. The one thing I will say from that goal from Cork City, Frank Gallagher started being, even when he spoke to the club's media team in recent weeks, he started being talking about defending from set plays. This time it was a cross into the box. I'm sorry, but they have to deal with that. They have to get rid of that. That shouldn't be
bounced too many times. Like she was given the freedom of Donnelly right down. Like, I mean, she had all day. Nobody really put a challenge in, and she's on the 6-yard line. Like, she should be tight.
Yeah. But it's even like the goal on the other side. On the other side for me, from Lauren Holman's corner, where Christine Drink sort of just flicks it on, and I think it was, I don't know if it's Abby Brophy on the post, but that probably needs to be cleared as well. And like you're talking goals like that, like there wasn't an awful lot of quality. Foyle made a nice save in the game.
Yeah, and Gatsy had a nice opportunity, and Foyle got down nice to the bottom corner to push her on the post. It was very impressive goalkeeping display from Foyle, though.
I think it's probably a fair result in terms of the two sides. Like it's mad when you look at it, that the fact that it's DLR's first point, but then for Cork it ends that run of defeats since they beat Waterford. And the question you sort of have at the minute is, where is the two sides' next points going to come from? Because it's difficult. Like we'll talk a little bit more about Sligo's defeat, but I think Sligo have definitely shown improvements, especially since that 4-0 loss to Cork. Whereas I don't think Cork have necessarily come on as much since that 4-0 victory against Sligo. I think Sligo are probably a little bit ahead of them at the minute for me.
Well, given that Sligo next league game, I know there's Aberdeen Sports Cup this weekend, but given their next league game is at home to DLR or away to DLR, realistically, you'd fancy them to at least get a draw out of that, if not maybe sneak a win. If they win that game and Cork and Waterford don't pick up points, you could have a very realistic situation where they're outside the bottom three, and that would have been unheard of maybe 3-4 weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely, and I wouldn't rule that out either. And that's the thing about it. I wouldn't rule it out. And like, even when you look at the Sligo game, yes, they were beaten 4-0 by Athlone, but I think that Athlone side who played like that would have probably done that to most teams in the league. And the interesting question I have for you is offside, yes or no? The Sligo Rovers have the ball in the net.
Funny, I said to you it wasn't offside. I don't think it was offside. I think it was handball.
I don't know about this, and I've watched that 5 or 6 times, that exact thing. And the reason why I don't know is because to me it looks like it hits the shoulder.
Yeah, it's
then after it hits the shoulder, the arm after it hits the shoulder, a couple of seconds later, the arm comes up.
I could see how a assistant referee or a referee in that situation goes, there's just too much going on there. I'm going to give a free out because it could be this, it could be that. It's probably one of them. I'll give a free out. I think it's probably a goal. The way it hits her so high up on the shoulder, for me, that's a shoulder as opposed to a goal. And if that goal goes in, I think it's a very different game. I think don't have. I think we're looking at a repeat of the Peamount encounter where get an early goal and sit back and defend it. And one team that can absolutely do that in this league is Sligo Rovers. When they get an early lead, they're very hard to beat. We've seen teams struggle to do that for years, not just under Steve Feeney this time, but in the previous iteration, and indeed with Tommy and Conor O'Grady last year. They're very hard to beat when they get ahead. They're very similar to the men's team. If they get a goal, you're going to struggle to beat Sligo Rovers. So it's interesting to see how that goes. I thought it was onside, and I thought it was a fair goal. Would have loved to have seen how the game would have played out had that happened. But
so would I. The one thing I will say from it, like, is when I think that sort of maybe gave Athlone a little bit of a rocket, because they just then sort of kicked on and sort of went into a massive different gear. The biggest takeaway from the game, I know we're going to talk about, for me, Maddie Gibson's performance is probably the performance of the weekend. Two assists and 2 goals. But the biggest takeaway for me is Roisin Molloy. She played more minutes this week, having played 40 last week. I think that is just massive, because for Athlone, they've had a couple of injuries at different times this season. To getting her back, Chloe Singleton's probably 6-8 weeks maybe even away as well. Like, it's just getting to the stage that they're getting their guns back.
Yeah, the thought that struck me over the weekend as I watched most of that Sligo Athlone game. The thought that struck me was, I can't wait to see what they do in the Champions League, because this group of girls, no disrespect to anyone who's gone before, but they seem to be better set up. Looking at the midfield that they have, like, you've got so much talent in there. You've got Kelly Brady, Izzy Groves, Hannah Waish, Madison Gibson. Like, I could keep going. Do you know what I mean? Roisin Molloy. There's so many really.
I'll go as far as saying we have. In my opinion, we've the best Shelbourne team we've ever had in the league, and I think we've the best Athlone team we've ever had in the league. And
I'd actually say that, apart from maybe, no, apart from maybe when players were brought in, and I speak of my own days in the Champions League when girls came in on loan. Peamount did it when they got to the knockout stages as well the following year. We brought, like when I was with St. Francis, we brought in girls from Liverpool. We brought in 2 from Liverpool. We brought in 2, or Aoife Herbert from Mayo, probably Castlebar at the time. We brought in players who were free agents to come in and play in the Champions League. That doesn't really happen anymore. These guests players, that just doesn't work. I think these are the 2 best squads we've seen in the league, period.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that.
They're unbelievably impressive, and they play each other in 2 weeks, which is even better.
Do you know what's funny? And I will go back to Athlone now in a second, because I never mentioned this, and I just thought about it. I had it on my notes as well. We have not seen Rowan McLaughlin, Alex Kavanagh, and Aoibhinn Clancy play together. That game could be the first league game that we see them 3 in a midfield together against Athlone. And that game on the 14th of June is absolutely massive, because the thing is, where do you see these 2 teams dropping points again this season? I don't. And that's the thing. Apart from against each other, I don't. And like, even you look at it from the goals, like Athlone's goals, they all came from width.
Yeah, I was going to say that. It's in my notes here in front of me, but I don't think you're doing a fair justice to the rest of the league, because I think 5 years ago I would have agreed with you. The 2 best teams are going to beat everybody except each other. The
league is great. Listen, the teams are great.
Or 8.
I will say, I really genuinely don't think, apart from each other, that these 2 teams are going to drop points for the rest of the season. I genuinely don't. And I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say it if I didn't actually. And that's how good I think the 2 squads are. Do I think teams are capable of giving them a game? Absolutely. Like we even seen when Shels played Galway. Likewise, when Athlone played Galway, the 2 sides just ran Galway into the ground. Galway gave it absolutely everything. Galway were brilliant against Shelbourne. Brilliant. They weren't as good against Athlone, but they were brilliant against Shelbourne. And like, even Phil Trill was very happy with their performance after the game, what they'd actually done. But like, I just think these 2 teams are just that little step above. Like, you look at it, Shels lost the Rovers on the opening day of the season. They haven't dropped the point since. Athlone have drawn the Rovers.
Yeah. So
haven't dropped the point in any of the game.
But if you look at a mini league table between those 3 teams, Shamrock Rovers have 4 points and the other 2 have 1 point and no points.
Yeah.
So Shamrock Rovers would argue that they're a better team than them. Now, of course, that's not how football works, but the reality is Shamrock Rovers have now put themselves in position with that, and they snatched and grabbed a win in Dalymount last weekend. Let's be honest about it. They were lucky to score. They had opportunities. Well, they had a few opportunities. It was a very, very drab game. There was very little in terms of quality outside of the last 10 minutes. Fiona Donnelly, very unlucky. Let's jump to that game for a minute. Fiona Donnelly, very unlucky to put the ball in the back of the net, but if she didn't do it, Ruisha Littlejohn was coming behind her. She was going to do it anyway, I think. But unfortunately for Donnelly,
the build-up for that goal for me
was
quality. The way they moved the ball around and they just left her. Like, even Emily Corbett coming slightly deep, Fiona Owens out on the right, then out to O'Gorman. Like, the build-up for me was very, very good. And that's the one thing that I think Rovers have shown. They're very good at football. They're at the nice football stuff.
Very good at football. Sounded like an anchorman.
It's just the killer instinct at the minute that maybe they don't have at times, where Colin O'Neill would like them to go and put teams to the sword. Like, as you say, like, it wasn't the greatest game of football. I will say this, though, from a Bohemians point of view, I think Leah Glennon has to score that opportunity when she's through on goal. And Savannah Kane, sort of, it's so close to goal, the power on it, it's unlucky. But for me, Glennon probably has to score that.
Glennon had the effort. It came back, and there was a bit of a schmozzle on the ball. I think there's a handball in the middle of that as well. They had claims for a penalty, in my opinion. It doesn't work their way. The ball comes back to Savannah Kane. She rasps the ball off the bottom of the bar. It stays out. They're very unlucky not to grab a draw. They probably would have been worth a draw on the day.
They've never beaten Rovers in the league or the cup since they've come in.
That's a Dublin derby effort there, if ever I heard it. I'd give them more motivation the next time they meet them. The final game of the weekend was, of course, DLR versus Cork, and we talked about that game. What game have I missed? We've done them all. We've touched on them all. Sorry, for some reason I had that with a note on my head. But overall, and I suppose we can talk a little bit about the results the previous week when we didn't have a show last week as well, and there was some big performances in there that kind of pull forward into this week, like particularly deserves a mention. I know I kind of joked on socials on Twitter during the week last week about they asked me to pick a team of the week, and I said, 1 Bonnie McKiernan, 2 Bonnie McKiernan, 3 Bonnie McKiernan. She was just unbelievable for Sligo Rovers as they snatched or held on for a draw in Tala. Shels beat Galway.
I love the fact she actually reacted to your tweet.
Shels beat Galway 2-1 down in Talca Park. Bows beat DLRs. You'd probably expect 3-1. Treaty with a big defeat to Peamount. So we see Peamount hot and cold some weeks, can put 4 past a good Treaty side and then struggle to beat a new Waterford team. Treaty get beaten.
We didn't even mention the fact that the stat I sent you over the weekend. The win for Peamount against Waterford was their first away win since the 11th of May last year in the league. Like, you'd have never thought that.
I didn't believe it. I actually had to go double check it because I was like, 12 months without an away league win. That's unheard of for Peamount. And when you consider there are definitely, no disrespect to any of the teams that we're going to mention, but there are definitely teams in there that they would expect to be comfortably favourites against in the bottom 3 or 4 of the table. And now all of a sudden they haven't beaten them in 12 months, which is absolutely nuts.
Yeah. Mental. Absolutely mental. But like that's the interesting thing about the league, and like that's where I sort of look at when I talk about the fact that I don't think Shels and Athlone will drop points, is because they're consistent, where the other sides haven't been consistent for me. The other sides, the way I'm looking at it at the minute is if Shels have a 6 out of 10 or Athlone have a 6 out of 10 against the majority of teams in the league, unless the other side is a 9, 10 out of 10, they're not going to be beaten. Yeah. Like, even we were talking about how good Wexford have been in recent weeks previously. They go in against Shels, they probably have a 6 out of 10 performance. Shels put 6 past them. It's just one of them that I hope I'm wrong. I absolutely hope I'm wrong, because if I'm not wrong, it means that we're either going to have a team win the league by 6.67 points, or we're going to have them two going really close to the end, and then a big gap between the next lot. But the other side of it as well is this is the first year that the league is going to be decided on goal difference as well, and you can definitely see teams Shels are not letting up on that. Like, Athlone have scored a bucket of goals, but they're 10 less goals than Shels. But I just think
Athlone have only conceded 2 goals in the league this year. That's unbelievable. 2 goalkeepers. I mentioned Megan Plashko earlier. She's actually obviously been out injured, and Maria, I'm not even going to risk chancing her name, but the able substitute. And they do have 2 good international goalkeepers who've come in this year, and I think that's key in terms of the solidity as well, because the players know if a goalkeeper gets suspended or injured, we've got an able replacement who's every bit as good. And you could argue that's the case in Sligo. Amber Hardy came in, took that jersey.
Let me give you another stat.
Yeah.
Amanda Budden's only conceded 7 goals. Same amount as Shelbourne.
Okay.
Like, for Peamount, the fact that Peamount have lost 3 games and drawn 1 game, they've only conceded 7 goals. What their problem is the other end of the field. They've only scored 11 goals. They've only scored 11 goals in 8 games. Compare that to even, like, if you look down the rest of the table, the only team who Galway, Bows, Cork are level with them on 11. Other than that, it's the bottom 3 who've scored less goals. Like it, and
yeah, that's the table.
We're used to Peamount scoring a lot of goals. You know what I mean? We're used to Peamount scoring a lot more goals than they have scored in recent years. And if they could get the upfront side of it sorted, I think they'd be able to push up that table an awful lot more. It's just like, because they're not conceding many goals.
Yeah, well, this is the league table after 9 rounds. Of course, a couple of back fixtures to be played in the coming weeks as well. Athlone, 1 point lead on the top of the table from Shels. They've both got 8 wins from their 9 games, but Athlone's draw versus Shels' defeat to Shamrock Rovers earlier in the year puts them that 1 point ahead. Then there's a glut of teams. Wexford just pipping everybody else for 3rd place at the moment, 16 points from them. Shamrock Rovers and Treaty with 2 big wins at the weekend sees them on 15 points. Peamount, another win for them, puts them above Galway on 13 points, while Galway and Bohemians were beaten at the weekend. Cork's draw puts them on 7, while Waterford and Sligo will have to stay where they were last week, and DLR Waves pick up their first points of the season. They'll be delighted with that, but it's a long way up for them at the moment, but hard to see where their next points are going to come from as well, Aaron.
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to see, and that's the one thing I don't like about the league, in the sense of there's definitely a divide, but there's definitely a bigger divide between the top 6, I'd say even the top 10, top 9 than the bottom compared to previous years, and it's difficult in that sense, because we want to see everybody being competitive in games. Like last year, there was times where we were like, I don't know who's going to win this game.
I think there's an argument, and I know we've spoken about it at different times over the last 5 years on the show, but I think there's an argument for 2 divisions of 8 in the league now. I think the quality is there to be in the top division of 8 teams, and I think it will be a breath of fresh air to the teams who are 10th, 11th, 12th in the table to be 2nd, 3rd, 4th in a second tier. I think that's maybe where we're going to end up.
For me, I think that you can have no more than 10 in it. If you were to have a second division, you can have no more than 10 in the Premier Division.
I think 2 8s will be fine.
I think eight would probably, at the way things are at the minute. Like, the other side of it as well is the cost wise of running a women's Premier Division team is going up and up and up every year. Like, we've seen what's happened in the UK yesterday, with Blackburn officially confirming that they're going to pull their women's team from the second tier in England due to costs. We've seen Reading have had to do it last year with their men's club financial sides not being great. The women's sides got pulled. It's happening more and more, that the costs.
That's the biggest problem I have with women's football in general at the moment, is the perception it has in the men's game of not bringing in money. And I don't think it needs to bring in money necessarily. Your academy doesn't bring in money, but people look at it as a tool to generate future earnings. And I think women's football have shown they can fill stadiums when they want to fill stadiums. And in time, as the girls that are going to games now at primary school age, from 7 to 12, 13, grow up and become mothers and become members of society, I think we're going to see a very different outlook on how the games work. And I think we need to be more realistic about the costs of running these, and particularly where it's a men's club. Like, Charlton set the tone for this 20 years ago. I think they won the FA Cup final. Their men's team got relegated, and they just binned the women's.
Did they win themselves? It was nearly themselves and Arsenal's nearly every year. Like, it's interesting. Like, if you look at, and I know we don't talk much about the likes of the WSL, but the amount of games Arsenal have played this year in the Emirates, I think I read something. Their at league average attendance this season was like 33,000. Yeah. Because they played that many games where they'd sold out the Emirates multiple times.
But you do the maths on that. If you're playing 10, 11 home games a year, average 33,000, that's 330,000 people through the gates. Say an average of a tenner, because a lot of kids get tickets.
I think some of the games were nearly 20. I've paid at the Chelsea for 25, 30 pound.
Even just taking an average of a tenner. Yeah, but even just taking an average ticket price of a tenner by the time you do concessions and everything, that's 3.3 million. Now, I'm sorry, if you can't run a professional women's team on 3.3 million, yeah, maybe the WSL is bigger than that, and it should be bigger than that, but that's still 100 grand a player. That's half your budget, and the rest goes to the off the field stuff. Like, it's doable. Now, whether clubs are going to fall into the same trap as we've done in men's football for the last 30 or 40 years of just throwing money at a handful of top players and bankrupting clubs and putting whole women's clubs out of business. But for a men's club to turn around with a budget, Blackburn's budget is probably in the region of 30 to 40 million a year. Are you trying to tell me that you can't work $1 million out of that budget?
Sure, they cut the women's budget last year to players were on a lot reduced contracts. It was working out nearly minimum wage for them as well. But it's that's the negative side of it. Let's talk. I want to mention this because I think we'd be doing a disservice if we don't. Let's talk Women's Champions League this weekend. Katie McCabe trying to be the 4th Irish women's player to win a Women's Champions League when she goes to play for Arsenal against Barcelona this weekend. The only other English team to win it were Arsenal with Yvonne Tracy, Emma Bourne, and the original Ciara Grant. So, like, it'd be a massive achievement for McCabe to go and do it. Like, I've seen her in her early Raheny days. You've seen her even before that, and like it's amazing to see, an Irish player on that front. It's brilliant to see.
No, absolutely. And the very, very best luck to Katie. She deserves all the success she gets. I know she gets a bit of a hard time at times with the whole Vera Pauw rubbish, but it is. Before we wrap up the past on the LOI Women's Premier Division, here are the top scorers in the table. Kelly Brady, as you mentioned, on 8 with Mackenzie Anthony, and you can read the players there yourself. A couple on the score sheet.
Look at Mackenzie Anthony's goals per minute.
Yeah,
it's a lot lower than.
But do you know, actually, what would surprise me there is Emily Corbett has a pretty good goals per minute ratio as well, like just over 600 minutes compared to the others around her, all having 700 or 800 plus. So, yeah, she's having a good season as well. She's been impressive because she hasn't had the best year or two. She's been a bit flitty around. I say that in the nicest possible way. She's been a bit kind of unstable in terms of where she is in her career. She went to Wexford, it didn't quite work out. Now she's at Rovers. Last year,
I think she just needed someone to put her. I think Collie's probably done it at times, put an arm around the shoulder and actually show her a bit of confidence that they're relieving her. And I think she'll definitely score double digits this season, at least for Shamrock Rovers.
Yeah, well, that would be the hope. In terms of the Avenir Sports Cup, of course, this takes place this weekend. Plenty of games.
Is it the Avenir Sports Cup or is it the All Ireland Cup? We still haven't really got that answer.
It's the Women's All Ireland Cup, according to all the paraphernalia that's come out. But some of the graphics on the streams in the first round all had Avenir on them. So I don't know is the short answer to that. Some big clashes today. Let's go down group by group. If we bring up the league tables, if I can just get them up on screen here for a second. If we look at the league tables.
And just as we're starting the Avenir Cup, because we didn't have a show last week, we confirmed the Shelbourne situation with Amanda McQuillan. It was confirmed by Shelbourne that they'd reached out to the FAI and red cards do not carry over to the next season. Why she didn't serve a suspension, that's for the league game. That's a decision for the FAI, but it means that she was not suspended for that first game. Shels were expecting her to be suspended for that first game, and it only became apparent the days in the lead up to the game. They had a young underage goalkeeper ready to play against Linfield, and it was only after communication with the FAI that they became aware that the suspension didn't carry over.
There was a Cliftonville player who didn't play because they believe she was suspended in the same round. So make what you will with that, but it's probably one of those issues where there's two governing bodies involved and maybe one set of rules and another set of rules. It's all a little bit messy, but yeah, it seems to be no wrongdoing done, but we didn't suspect anyone of that in the first place anyway. Division 1, Group A, this is what it looks like at the moment. Shels, they are in prime position to seal a quarterfinal spot for themselves. They host, they travel to Dalymount to play Bohemians. A win there will see them guarantee themselves a top 2 spot in the group. Sligo Rovers, they travel to Linfield, and they will be looking to get their season.
Do you know what? This is interesting. This is an interesting little dynamic here, because you would say Shels should beat Bohs, and then if Sligo can get something out of the Linfield game, we could go into the last day with 3 potentially having, if it's a draw, could go into the last day with 3 teams having the potential of qualifying from that group. I wouldn't be surprised if Sligo did get something out of that game, and Shels beat Bohs, and we have 3 teams on 1 point and 2 points coming into the last game.
Well, that applies whatever the result in the last game is, because if Linfield do beat Sligo, they will be also within a shout of catching Bohs in the last game, and they play Bohs.
But the problem is if Linfield beats Sligo, Linfield will have it in their own hands, because of the fact that they'll play Bohs, where Sligo will have to play Shels in the last game. So, you know, for Sligo, realistically, if Sligo are to get out of this group, Sligo have to beat Linfield.
You have to get a result against Linfield, absolutely. In terms of Group B, DLR Waves play Lisburn Rangers, and Wexford, they host Shamrock Rovers. And win for whoever wins that game at Ferrycarrick Park will go into the semi-finals. And to be honest, with the form for DLR and Lisburn in the last couple of seasons, it's hard to see anything but Shamrock Rovers and Wexford coming out of this group completely. It's going to be a rough day for the two, and at the bottom, Lisburn and DLR, a rare chance to kind of get a good win. It's in the bowl. It'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, I think I'd definitely make Lisburn I'd definitely make DLR favourites against Lisburn. I think Shamrock Rovers and Wexford, they've always been quite close games. just be interesting to see if either manager sort of rotates a little bit, because I don't think in the grander scheme of things a loss for you them two sides is going to be detrimental on the group.
Yeah. Group C sees Peamount host Galway United at 5 o'clock, while Cliftonville host Cork City at 3 o'clock.
Oh, that's a
It's
manky trouble.
It's an awful journey for Cork, but they will need to get a win out of this, or potentially be out of the. That's a worse trip back if you've lost to Cliftonville, which is.
Do you remember? Do you remember the first round of it? They played someone up north, and then they got to the semi-finals. Cork did, and they were back up north again.
Cliftonville,
Cliftonville up north. Like it's a tough trip. Like Cliftonville were decent against Galway, and the fact that their season hadn't started at that stage, like I would probably make Cliftonville favourites in that game. And the other game, like for Galway, can they stop the rot? I know it's not league form, but can they get a result to actually break that bit of a boundary that they've had in the last couple of weeks?
I think they'll want it. I think
they will want it. I have a feeling that Peamount could make a couple of changes in this game, just obviously with the fact that the several players out injured. I wouldn't be surprised that Peamount don't necessarily risk someone like a Sive Doyle or Karen Dunn over 90 minutes, and they only play a partial part in the games.
Yeah, interesting to see how that goes. And then Glentoran, they are away to Waterford. That's a fairly long trek as well for the Glens, while Treaty and Athlone will do battle in Woolen.
We said at the start, when this first round of the games happened, that Treaty were in a bad position because of the fact that they had only drawn with Waterford. Yeah. When we take into account the 2 red cards, Kelly Brady and Maddie Gibson should both miss this game, having been sent off in the last game. They're 2 big players to take out of that team for Athlone. You should say Athlone should still have enough, but I wouldn't be ruling Treaty out of this game or getting something out of this game.
A Treaty draw might be enough to give them an opportunity to get into the last stages, although if they draw, it would effectively mean Glentoran go through top the group with a win.
But that might be good for them. That might be good for them, because then that means they go play Glentoran the last day. If Glentoran are already through,
if they're already through in a competition that is lower down the totem pole than the league in their eyes, it could be an easier game. I fancy Treaty, and I could be eating a lot of humble pie next week, but I fancy Treaty to go on and actually do really, really well in this competition, and potentially even be the third. Them or Rovers, Shamrock Rovers, to really challenge Athlone or Shels to win this. They're my 4 outside bets. Yeah, I can't see any of the northern teams doing it. I'd like to be pleasantly surprised. I love seeing the northern teams doing very well in this competition. I think if they don't, it becomes a drag where they look at it as a time suck, money suck, without any kind of success coming back in it. And the fact that they've made finals in recent years, Cliftonville in the final, I think it makes a huge difference.
From what's been said to me, the managers up north love it. They love this competition and they love the opportunity. But like, this group is just a group that everything is wide open. What's going to happen? Who knows? I think coming out of this weekend, we'll either be talking about, like, the best part of it here is if the 2 games finish the draw, and then you're like, everything's to play for going into the last round of the games, and like,
that's what we want.
Could be just mental.
That's what we want. It might be what they necessarily want. So many other things. We haven't really talked about the leases for Shels and Treaty. Let's quickly just discuss them for a minute, but they're really positive news stories for the league.
Yeah, and Shelbourne won. There was a lot of talk a couple of years ago. Would Shels potentially buy the AUL? There was talks of that, and like there was like when Bowes took over. Like, you have to think Bowes also have the Oscar trainer as well, so it's not just that Bowes have DCU, and investing in facilities is probably the biggest thing in terms of training grounds and supports, because the worst problem for some clubs is like the likes of Bray, Bray, Derry get away with it if they wanted. They could train on the Astro in the Brandywell some days. But like Derry are renting out their men's side are renting out Derry GAA. You're looking at, there's no real, some clubs don't have that, and like if teams have to move around for training and stuff like that, it's not ideal. And I think for Shels, it's a statement of intent and the investment that's going to go in there. Like we talked last year about the good stuff Rovers were doing off the field with the the kids and the creche stuff, how that could work. Shels having these sort of facilities, maybe Shels can tap into a lot of that as well, and they can be the next to. But like, I think for every club, an investment in facilities, it can only help as well with the likes of the underage women's team, and with Shels being a long term tenant in the AOL, I think it's only great news.
And to be fair, when you look at what they own compared to maybe some of the junior teams or intermediate teams around them, like you look at Home Farm up the road, Kevin's Boys only up the road, even closer to home, Dublin Port Stadium, as I think it's called this weather, which is where Stella Maris play, which is on the same road. There's probably 7 or 8 clubs that have better facilities outside of Talca Park. If you don't consider the stadium, which most clubs protect, they train elsewhere. There's loads of junior clubs that have better facilities than Shels do. So to see them taking a big step and an 18-year investment and an 18-year deal to manage the AUL and take that on and build 4 new pitches, that's a really exciting time, I think, for Shels.
I remember being in the AUL when the Special Olympics was on in Ireland all them years ago, and the football was on up there, and going up there for an afternoon to have a wander and have a look around, and like even as a youngster, you were sort of a bit in awe of the whole facilities, being like, oh wow, there's loads of pitches here. But it's good to see, and then like even you see when Shels, anytime the women have played up there, they've always played on that front. They've always played on that front main pitch, the nice pitch at the front, and I think it's a really good investment. Likewise, I think the treaty one, the fact that they have a lot more control over Markets Field as well is even better for them. It's even more, and like they're working closely with the likes of UL and stuff like that to continue to build stuff, and that's where these sort of links and these sort of bridges and these sort of partnerships really, really work. And it's good to see, like even Wexford's women's team are trying to IT Carlow. Obviously, the close link there with the college, or SUTU or whatever it is.
Yeah, Southeastern Technical.
Like I think that these sort of things are unbelievable, and clubs need facilities, and there's always ways to do things right that can benefit without having to go and just buy massive facilities.
But it's decades of neglect that we have to catch up from that. But we're getting there slowly but surely. And plenty of clubs doing really, really good work. Beside me here, Sligo Rovers have a huge push on now to raise funds for this master plan, and they've got some funding, big funding, millions, if not 10 million, secured for what they expect to be a 17 million project. So plenty of work to do for all the clubs aside of that. We've about 2 minutes to talk about the international team. Let's talk Erin Healy, because she's the only name we don't know. I want to talk about her, but also want to talk about 3 players unattached in the squad. I know it's a bugbear of both of ours. Your thoughts on the 2 of those things? 2 minutes.
Erin Healy, Carla Ward spoke highly of her yesterday, sort of the clip the FAI put out of her scoring goals in the A-League and doing very well in the A-League. Was her first year there, but it sounds I think she's either going to probably end up in the WSL or in the NWSL come this off season. It'll be interesting to see what she can do in an Ireland jersey. There was sort of talk that they looked at her the last camp and sort of said no, but with the fact that you've now Heather Payne, you have a couple of players, now Leanne Kieran in this camp, it was an opportunity to bring her in. The one thing I will say, because I know people always get sort of, why no more League of Ireland players? Not ways there should be more League of Ireland players. Carla was sort of speaking yesterday about her squad for the USA games. She thinks some players may not travel. So if some players don't travel, it could be a case of we seen a couple of years ago when Nicola Sinna got her cap against the USA, where we see players from the league potentially getting an opportunity to travel on that trip. And I would expect we could see the likes of Kelly Brady potentially in that sort of squad. Unattached players, it's a bugbear for me. There was a lot of talk about it, even at the media event, sort of asking about it. Carla was asked a couple of questions about sort of unattached players. She was sort of saying that she thinks they'll all end up with clubs quick enough, but like it's never nice to see unattached players in the league, in the squad, but it's sort of nearly becoming a norm at the minute, whether it should be or whether it should or shouldn't be.
Finally, Louise Quinn in the squad. She retired last month. Your thoughts on that?
So she retired. So when I read the press release, I thought she was going to retire from everything at the end of the championship season. But she made it clear that she hadn't actually retired from everything. What her plan is she's potentially going to be available for the 4 games. She's played her last club game, So after the 4 games, the 2 games, the qualifier, the 2 Nations League games coming up, and then the 2 games in America, she will no longer be available. Now, one thing I will say is Carla Ward has come out and said she can't guarantee that Louise Quinn will get minutes to get a send off in these sort of games.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know what you mean. I'm under pressure for time. Final thing, 1-word answer. How many countries many different leagues are represented in the squad selection?
Belgium, WSL Championship, NWSL, Australia. I'd say 7.
Yeah, you're bang on. 7. I hadn't counted the championship as 2. That was 1. But yeah, 7 countries. Listen, we will be back with you again next week. As always, Aaron, a pleasure to have you. We'll be back talking all things League of Ireland Women's Premier Division next week. We will talk to you then.